Hello, Armature 9 subscribers. Thank you for tuning in. Something really exciting happened a few days ago. I don't know if you caught this, but one of the top influencers from Italy, her name is Francesca Presentini from Fraffrog, made a review of a number of art mannequins out on the market. And she picked some of the very top dolls out there, and she included the Armature 9 figure in the mix, which was a real honor and very exciting to see. Not only that, she was ranking each of these as she was presenting them, and she rated the Armature 9 mannequin a 4.5 out of 5 stars.
Pienissimo, molto molto bello.
And she only had one critique, and it was with the ankles, and it was a very legitimate critique, and I'm planning on doing a follow-up video where I will talk about why the design is the way it is there, but also some changes that I will be making because of her bringing this to my attention. So I'm really excited on a number of levels for this having happened. There was one doll, however, that she ranked higher than Armature 9, and it was the top ranking doll. She gave it a 5 out of 5. We got a 4.5 out of 5, which is not bad. But the one she ranked higher was called Stickybones, and it reminded me, I actually have one of those dolls laying around somewhere. Except it was in the bag that it came in, because it comes in pieces. You have to assemble it yourself. And I thought, listen, I need to do a little comparison here and see if it really is any better than the dolls that I make. Now, granted, I'm biased for obvious reasons, but I will try to be as balanced and as fair as possible. You may recall I did a review very much like Francesca's 6 years ago, featuring dolls that were more prominent back then. And it was nice to see that the Armature 9 mannequin still stacks up now to dolls that have come out since then, or at least have become more prominent and well known since then, in particular the Stickybones figure. So let's take a look. Does the Stickybones figure live up to the hype? Well, first of all, when we were assembling it, actually my son, I had him do it, the pieces would be falling apart. In particular, the lower portion of the spine. There's clearly some sort of defect there, because after this happened, I looked online and other people are pointing out some similar issues with that joint. And so that joint has a tendency of falling apart very easily. And the fingers, because they're all individual pieces that you have to assemble, they fall apart really easily as well, not only during the assembly, but also during the posing as well. So that was really disappointing. I think the biggest disappointment was that my product actually happened to be, the one they sent me happened to be missing pieces. I was missing 2 joints for the fingers, and the hands didn't have any magnets in them, which, I can imagine it's a very easy mistake to make, especially when you're having to pack all these individual pieces and shipping them to thousands of people, because they actually, when they launched this product, they raised over $1 million, and they had folks from Autodesk and folks from Disney that partnered up with them. So they had a lot of marketing firepower, and I think perhaps they got more orders than they were anticipating. So they went straight from design to mass manufacturing. And so it's entirely injection molded, which is usually the case with most dolls out in the retail space. And so that's one area where Armature 9 just really can't compete with, except unless you enjoy the charm of something that's more homemade, which you definitely get with the Armature 9 figure. But I am trying to transition to injection molding, as many of you know if you've been following the blog. Now, the injection molding quality from the Stickybones figures doesn't seem to be that high, which surprised me, because they talked about how in order to pull off this design, a very ambitious design to be fair, they would need to have a level of manufacturing that had a level of precision similar to what it would take to produce a Rolex watch. Now, that may be true, but perhaps they couldn't achieve that level of precision. I've been iterating on the Armature 9 dolls for 12 years now, over a decade. And I've had to design them in a manner that is very robust, because my manufacturing methods have a lot of variability. And so I've had to design them so that they work even if variability exists. So when you can imagine, when I switch to fully injection molding these pieces, it's going to be something else. When posing the Stickybones mannequin, I ran it through some tests. You may recall I did something like this 6 years ago. I reviewed a number of other dolls and I put them through a variety of posing tests, and right away Stickybones just couldn't get there. I couldn't raise the leg all the way up, for example. You know, a classic ballerina leg stretch where she raises the leg up and hugs the leg. Stickybones can't do that. I can't do a very graceful lateral reclining pose where the legs are kind of to the side and leaning sideways, but still keeping the spine vertically up, resting on the side of the pelvis. Can't do that because the leg will pop off. It doesn't have enough range of motion so that you can tuck the leg under the pelvic floor. And so right away, I was really surprised to see that it couldn't achieve some really foundational poses. Now, it does have more range of motion in the fingers, even though it only has 4 fingers instead of 5. It does allow you to abduct and adduct the fingers. So you can flare them out and bring them in closer together. And that is something that I'm working on, actually. I'm hoping to bring that level of articulation to the Ranger mannequins. However, their fingers, like I said, they pop off all the time. And so unless you're working in a really clear, pristine environment, it's going to be really annoying to have to go down on the floor hunting for those pieces somewhere, because they're going to fall and roll under something easily. They did for me. Just in taking these few pictures, things were falling apart all the time, and I was having to reassemble it and repose the figure. It surprises me that people are able to do stop motion, such amazing stop motion animation with this figure. I'm certain it must be frustrating to do. Or it's always possible that they've addressed these issues. However, I haven't heard of them changing the design at all. All I've heard of them doing is offering more color choices. So I think a lot of these issues are still there. The shoulders have a really nice fluid full range of motion, so you can bring the shoulders forward and back, which you can only do with the Ranger figures if you were to add on a pair of flexible clavicles. That would give you the up and down movement and the forward and back movement. The spine actually surprised me because it looks like from the design that it would have multiple points of articulation, because it has 3 segments. It has the pelvis, the center portion, and the torso, but actually those joints are rigid. They only connect in one of the sockets. And so it has actually the exact same number of points of articulation as the Ranger figures, just 2 essentially, but it doesn't articulate sufficiently, interestingly, because the peanut design that I've created, which by the way, it kind of looks like they appropriated that design for some of their joints, allows you to have sort of a forward and inverse kinematic movement with the spine, because you can position the entire rib cage and torso forward and back, left and right, whereas you can't really do that with Stickybones figure. You can only sort of articulate it in a forward kinematic manner where you go from bottom to top. You can't move the top forward and move the top back and keep the pelvis in place. It has to be connected in an arc at all times. And so you can't achieve as believable poses with the spine, surprisingly, even though it looks like it may provide more range of motion. You can't fold the arms all the way back, although surprisingly you can get pretty darn close, but at that point the joint starts to come apart. You can bend the knees all the way back, but you're left with a tiny point there at the knee, and so you can't do things like setting the figure down and having it balance itself on its knees like you can with the Ranger figures, because I'm using 2 points of articulation for the knees, whereas they're trying to get away with that full range of motion with just 1 point of articulation. So interestingly, on the range of motion side, Ranger still excels, except for in the smaller areas like in the fingers, and I guess one other area is the ankles. And this was the part that Fracesca had critiqued about. Now, the ankle range of motion has improved in 2024 in that you can now truly get into any position that a human can with the ankles, whereas before you couldn't quite have much inversion of the ankles. This is the movement that happens when you sprain your ankle. There was a little bit there before, but since the introduction of the new material, there's a lot more now. And so you can have sort of the legs flared out all the way and still make flush contact with the ground. Now, Stickybones' ankles does this much better, and it has far more range of motion there. But it seems to me in the areas where range of motion really matters for achieving some of the foundational poses that I mentioned earlier, it can't do it. And I think the worst part really is the fact that many of the parts fall apart really easily, making posing rather frustrating. One of the other, perhaps the most frustrating thing, is that the magnets on the feet are not permanent fixtures. They're not glued. They're designed to be removed, but the problem is if the feet come really close together, it'll suck the magnet out. Even with the little caps that they've designed, the magnet will fly out, and both magnets will fly out and land who knows where. And that was rather frustrating. I think if I were going to be using this doll, I would probably glue those permanently because it just got really frustrating after a while dealing with these magnets flying all over the place. The little caps, I think, might have worked, but they don't really snap in well. The fitting wasn't there. There's definitely a lack of precision in the manufacturing that they went with, or they designed it in a manner that required way too much precision for what they were capable of doing. And so there are areas where the manufacturing is lacking and wasn't able to achieve the goal that the design set out to achieve. So all around, I'm kind of disappointed. There are a lot of strengths, of course, which I've mentioned. It's heavy because it's solid, and that's one of the downsides of everything being injection molded, is you can't make things hollow unless you design it like that. And I've tried to do that with my designs. You'll notice I have these cavities in the legs, these cavities in the torsos, which I think makes it look kind of cool and slick and sporty. But that's going to help later on, especially when I injection mold, because it'll make the figure lighter still. But the Stickybones figure is heavy, and heaviness is a point against the figure because it makes it more likely that a pose is not going to be held. So I think all around, range of motion wise, Ranger still wins. However, the doll I'm using here isn't even Ranger, it's the tween mannequin, because as you know, the figures are designed to be anatomically accurate, and so you can get different age groups. You can get an adult, those are the Rangers XY and XX. You can get a teenager, a tween, which is this one. You can get a kid, which is even shorter, and you can get an infant, a little baby, and they're all anatomically proportionally accurate, because the anatomy is quite stylized. Now, all the things that I'm saying here are true also of the Rider mannequin, which is our most inexpensive figure. It's only $50, and of all of them, probably the one that's best suited for stop motion animation. And I'm hoping to do some videos on stop motion and feature the new chroma green stand that now you can get with Rider. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for a follow-up video on the ankles and a response video to Fracesca. Once again, I'm really grateful to Fraffrog and the team there for including us in such an epic review. It's really amazing to see. It's probably the video with most views featuring Armature 9 out in the internet universe, and so I'm incredibly grateful for that. It will help increase awareness, hopefully, of the Armature 9 product line. But hopefully this lets you see that even Stickybones can't compete with the range of motion that Ranger is capable of doing. And if you disagree, please leave it in the comments. If some of you have had the same frustrations with Stickybones, please leave that in the comments as well, so that I know that it's not just me, or perhaps it is only me. It would be good to know. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.